Today, I'd like to talk about something that is very dear to me, just kind of a whole kind of broad concept that really speaks to me as a person, and that's swords. I really like swords. I've always been a huge fan of knives and swords and blades and things like that. Still am. That's going to irritate me if I keep those on the whole time. Um, I really do enjoy swords and weaponry and combat to a much higher degree these days, considering I started kendo a while back and very much enjoying that. Never really been into other sports and things, but as soon as you have the ability to hit other people with sticks, I'm there. And that kind of really bleeds over into a lot of other things that I'm a huge fan of. One Piece is one of them. I'm a huge fan of One Piece, and outside of my love of blades and things like that, there are many things I enjoy about it, but particularly the niche that I really enjoy in there is weapons and swords and cool things like that, which is why Zoro is very obviously my favorite character and obviously the best character in all of One Piece, as well as other sword people like Odin and Mihawk and all sorts of other people like that. But today I kind of just wanted to talk about swords in general and other sharp metal objects, I suppose, because it's not just swords, but I have quite an affinity for most weaponry kind of things. Not really into guns, but yeah, they're pretty interesting too. But for me, a lot of things intersect at that one place being swords. A lot of things in One Piece intersect there, a lot of things in Kendo, or Kendo as a concept kind of goes there, and my blacksmithing, which are three really big things, probably the main big things about this channel, kind of all mixed together at this one point. So I kind of wanted to talk about a few things in it a little bit more broadly as just kind of an opening sword talk thing. So but let's do that. What I have with me today is a sword that I have had for many, many years. I bought it at a small shop very close to where I live now for not that much money, and they only had one in the shop. And I'm so glad that I did, because I've had this thing for over a decade pretty easily, actually. It's traveled through different countries and come all the way back, and it is still holding together. Not the highest quality sword, but a pretty decent one. Better than those display ones that you usually get that are practically at that level of quality, but for the actual sword. So I've had this one for many years, and I'm looking forward to increasing my blacksmithing and swordsmithing skills, particularly so that I can maintain these ones and make them better. But at the moment, it is just nice to have my own sword. On this property here, I have my own forge, and that's where I make my own knives, and that's kind of one of the in-between bits between kendo and blacksmithing, which is one of the things that I want to do is make swords. There are a lot of things to do in blacksmithing. There are a lot of really easy things comparatively, and there are a lot of very difficult things. And there aren't many things in blacksmithing that I see and go, oh, I have to absolutely do something like that. There are some cool inspirations and things like that, save for katanas. Katanas are the one thing that I see in bladesmithing and go, I have to make those. I need to learn how to make that, because I've always been fascinated with them and the whole Bushido way and the way that swords are viewed and the spirit of a swordsman that is encapsulated in a blade. There are a lot of concepts like that that I'm a huge fan of, and I really want to tackle them from the beginning, literally at a basic level all the way to the highest level, essentially. And by doing that, that's just kind of me documenting my progress through these things, which I haven't done a whole lot of yet. I'm still playing with the idea of it, really, but I think it's quite cool, and it's nice to share those experiences with other people that are like-minded or enjoy talking or hearing about these things, but may not necessarily want to go down them themselves. I mean, if you're also a kendoka or a blacksmith or a One Piece fan, great, let's have some fun conversations about that, which is kind of why this is here. But also, I just like to talk about these things, and why not? So, I am a couple of years into my blacksmithing now. I haven't really leaned into it hard enough. It is quite a difficult path. It's quite costly, and it's quite time-consuming as well, especially if you spend hours and hours and hours in a forge, and then you mess up your blade on a heat treat, and you essentially wasted your time. Well, you didn't really waste your time, because you still got some experience and you still learned a couple things, hopefully, in doing that. But in terms of like one product that you go in to make, if you mess up the heat treat before getting to the handles or anything, you can basically just throw that piece of steel away and start again. And that can be very demotivating, but yeah, you kind of just have to, like anything, get stuck into it and be really bad at it until one day you're somehow a little bit less bad at it. So bladesmithing is one of those things for me. Bladesmithing, kendo, and content creation now. Kind of starting 3 really big, difficult paths all at the same time, and not giving much thought into how possible that is, and just kind of going for it. So wish me luck, I guess. But my blacksmithing, it has at least come a decent way in these last few years. When I started bladesmithing, I couldn't really do anything in the forge, despite having gone to a few other people's forges over my life and made a couple of small knives. That's very different from having your own space and on your own steam trying to figure all of these things out. But it's quite fun. It is enjoyable, if somewhat demotivating, but now, as opposed to before, I have a lot more competence in the forge and with power tools, and myself in general, really. I've got a lot more self-confidence in a lot of things like that, because one of the main differences between you, whoever you are, John, if that's your name, sorry if that was creepy, but the only difference between you, John, and another great bladesmith is your confidence in your ability and your execution of that ability, essentially. So a lot of that is only learned by actually doing it and getting that raw experience, but the confidence with it it's a little bit dubious. It's a little bit strange, because you could be better at bladesmithing than you think, and you're more capable of it than you know, but you would hold yourself back in most cases, or at least especially in my case, hold yourself back from doing it because of that lack of belief, because you don't think that you know how to make swords. Of course you can't. If you do think you can, then you've at least got that chance. It's that thing that everyone says, if you believe that you can't, then you definitely can't, or whatever it is. But I've kind of gotten to the point now where I can walk into my forge and I can take an angle grinder and cut off a piece of steel and heat up the furnace, and not amazing hammer work, but at least getting me through kind of hammer work to mold the shape a little bit. Then I take it to the grinder and I can make at least something that looks vaguely knife shaped, right? I mean, when I started, it was basically just a solid wall. I had no idea what I was doing, and everything I attempted felt difficult and dangerous and like the wrong thing to do. And yes, you're going to do the wrong thing a lot. That's what it means to learn something. You're going to be doing it the incorrect way a lot of times, until you've in yourself learned why it is the incorrect way, what the correct way is, and how to do that. And a very interesting thing I've noticed about this is it was helped a lot by my kendo. So in the forge, I don't really have anyone to tell me what I'm doing right or wrong in there. There are a few other people that I can contact, but I'm a very offline, in my own world kind of person. If somebody comes into the forge in person, we work together, that's one thing, but talking online while I'm doing something is a little bit strange, unless it's video games or what we're doing now, because that is what I'm doing. Anyway, so a thing in kendo is you get told no a lot. That is most of what happens in kendo, is somebody stronger, more experienced, and like more well-versed in kendo than you is going to be standing there going, no, 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 your footwork is wrong, that strike wasn't right, you need to raise your arms more, you didn't ki on that one. You just hear no all the time, and that's okay. It is a little bit difficult, admittedly. It is a strange thing. We're a lot more open with no in kendo than a lot of other things I've experienced, because we're all there to learn the same things. We're all there to learn the same way, and by having someone who's taken that time and learned those lessons, to be able to say, hang on, you're not doing that right, no, your foot's not quite aiming the right way, you're not moving forward, whatever it is, that no is a reinforcement. It is them guiding you to do the right thing. It's just a little bit aggressive sometimes when you just feel like you don't know what you're doing. So by doing this in kendo, and by going to training all the time and being told, no, that's not how it's done, no, that's not how that's done, and going through the process of correcting myself and listening to people's advice has really helped me in a lot of other areas of my life, particularly like my blacksmithing, where I can go in, and even though I'm demotivated by being an awful blacksmith, that's okay. Because when you start something, you're in all likelihood going to be terrible at it. I would be amazed if anyone stepped in and was ready to become, God, even 6th Q in kendo, 8765432112345678. So there are 16 levels. Even at the introductory stuff, there's so much that takes time and practice and dedication to really drill into your body to remember. It's not as simple as walking into a dojo and asking for a black belt. You have to go through the training. You have to make the mistakes so that you can learn the proper context and the true way forward in that medium or art form or martial art or whatever it happens to be. So I think it's just very interesting. But I wanted to talk more about swords. So let's do a little bit more of that. For me, this confidence has been very important because I want to be better at blacksmithing. I want to be better at a lot of things in my life, and I'm just not yet, despite a long time and quite a few different methods and things. You don't always kind of get the direction you think you want to be going in, but you might ultimately end up in a good place anyway. I kind of want to be better at bladesmithing and more devoted to it and just stop being so awful all the time. And it would be nice to want that and for it to happen, but that's not how it goes. You kind of just got to keep doing things. So doing helpful things and progress towards the thing you want to be doing. And what that means is doing this. This is a terrible knife. It's barely a knife. The materials aren't really the right ones to be used. The techniques, okay, well, this isn't entirely finished yet, but the techniques aren't all there. It's kind of still at a very basic levels. You see the wobbly lines there on the grinding. I mean, this one still has a long way to go. So what I can do is kind of grind that down to actually be an edge and then clean it up a lot. And that's a lot of what you do when you're early on in things. You start making something with the idea of what you want to be doing in your head, and then you kind of see why you're unable to do that, and then fix it until you are able to do it. So for me, this represents a decent amount of progress because I don't know about you, but to me it at least looks kind of like a knife. You should see some of the things in my failure box in my forge, which is just a box of lessons, you know, things that you go, I'm not good enough to fix this yet, or it's now beyond repair. It goes in that box for me to remember not to make that mistake again. This at least looks a little bit better than that, which proves to me that I've learned a few lessons, like putting a pin in. I'll go over one of those now. Putting a pin in, you know, working with the wood, shaving it down, all the things you need to know about working with the steel, heating it up, getting it to the right temperature, which are good hammering techniques, which are bad, how to do all sorts of different things. I do genuinely enjoy doing this. It is just very difficult, and it's very frustrating because for something like this, you kind of can't just walk into a forge and be a master bladesmith. You kind of have to take the long way around. One of the things you'll notice is this wood is like not amazing for it, but it's easier to shave off, so it's okay for practicing certain things and not others. And this is what it is. Bladesmithing and kendo and content creation are just making a bad knife and then accepting that the knife is bad, understanding why the knife is bad, and then making a better one. So this I wouldn't really call a knife. It's literally blunt. It's not anything that a knife does, but it's got potential because I still have the ability to grind it down, to work on the handle a bit, to give it a bit of varnish. Wish I remembered to put glue on the inside, and these are all just teething problems that one has in the beginning. And I like that I can see that I'm making progress in it because it's something that I enjoy. And one day I'm going to look back on this knife, this video, all the things that I'm doing now and go, good God, I was so bad at this. How was I ever this incompetent with this thing? And that's just kind of a thing that humans do these days, as far as I understand, which, look, don't get me wrong, I dislike it too, but that's unfortunately just how the world is working these days. So, yeah, let's stop on that depressive note and look at some of these things that I've made. So, I've only really brought these two with me today, and the sword, because I didn't want to bring all of my swords for one short little video, but I at least wanted something to mark a few different kind of differences. So a lot of people see knives that other people make, or see guitar notes that they play, songs that they play, anything like that, and they don't really have the context for why that thing isn't as good as it could be, or whatever it is. And I think that's one thing. It's different to go up to a 3-year-old and say that painting that you've done is awful, it's terrible, you'll never be an artist. Like, they're a 3-year-old. What do you expect from them? Like, at that level, little finger paintings that scarcely say mom and dad on them are like, that's about what we expect from them, right? And that's okay. And there's value and sentiment in that. So that's what things like this are to me. These are my 3-year-old drawings, because although I did them in my 20s, they still look like they're done by a 3-year-old. And there's a lot of things I don't like about them. And an important thing is accepting that you don't like those things and accepting why you don't like those things and what direction you want to go after that. So this is a knife that I made a few months ago. It's actually probably one of the only knives that is actually a finished thing for my workshop, because I have a big problem of starting and then not quite finishing it because I notice something's wrong with it. I do it in my kendo with a strike. I mentioned it in my last video where I would strike and stop, and then you have to fully commit. Even if it's one of the worst things you've ever made, you have to fully commit and make it, and then look at it and see all the things that you don't like about it that you would change. And then you start again, and then you make some of the same mistakes, and some of them you actually do clear up. And then like this one, I did the pinning correctly, and this one I did the pinning very not correctly. Here's a little tip: if you want to pin something, use something to kind of like focus that energy, because if you just put a pin in and you hit it, it's gonna go skew, which you can see it went very wrong there. Yeah, wasn't great. So what you need to do is you need to make mistakes, and then you need to work on fixing those mistakes, and you need to do that again and again and again until you reach what you actually want to be aiming for, essentially. So for me, it's cool to look at something like this because it's better than I was doing before. I mean, it's actually got an edge. It's not sharp, but it's actually got an edge. There's a little bit of brass fitting on this one. The blade has been cleaned up significantly more. You know, all of it's just a little bit more presentable. Now, to be fair, the other one that I'm making here is not finished, but I can already see that it is better than what I was doing before. I learned how to do the pin correctly. I just kind of focused a little bit more on paying attention to the smaller details of the blade so that it doesn't get too thin, or the difference between the edge and the back of the blade are wildly out. All sorts of things like that are just things you need to learn by doing, which I don't like. I don't like that I can understand all the parts of a sword and I understand how they fit together, and then my hands are not capable of recreating that. They're not capable of translating what I have in my head to a physical object. At least not yet. So I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about blacksmithing and where I'm at the start of this journey and what I'm kind of aiming for here, because it's very unclear when you start something where it's going to end up, at least to you. A lot of people will look at you and see things that you don't recognize about yourself because they're easier to see from the outside. A lot of people look at me and know a lot of things about me. I bumped into someone the other day when we were buying ice cream. I never knew this guy, at least not as far as I'm aware. And just one look at me, and his first question was, "So, what did you think of the newest episode of One Piece?" And I like that, because although it's an assumption, it's a pretty safe assumption. Not only did he assume that I'm a One Piece fan, but I'm a One Piece fan that also watches the anime and is enough of a fan to have watched the newest episode a couple hours after it's come out. And you know, he was right. Definitely can't be mad about an assumption someone made if it turned out to be correct. You know, like that would be a weird thing to be mad about. But, you know, I just really enjoyed that, because this was somebody that could identify things that I am passionate about that they're also passionate about at a glance. And that was very cool. And a lot of people see me and have known for a long time that I like blades and I like blacksmithing and I like swords. And it would make a lot of sense to have a forge, to have a sword, to learn how to use the sword, to learn the Budo way, to be more social with people, because I'm a very people person despite my incredible amounts of anxiety. There are lots of things that we can tell about people and ourselves through other people's perspectives that the internal person doesn't really register. So yeah, I kind of wanted to just talk about that. The video may be a little bit all over the place, but I did just kind of want to talk about swords at this very surface level. I can always talk about actual swords, because at this point I've been talking about sword-related things. But swords are a thing I'm incredibly passionate about. I want to get better at using them. I want to get better at making them. I want to get better at talking about them. They're just something that I enjoy. And for me, that's a very good place to start, because I like having a solid base of something to work with. So yeah, I'm going to talk about swords more often. I'm going to talk about the differences between swords. I'm going to be talking about the journey to getting better at making swords, because it is quite a journey, and I'm going to be doing it anyway, so I may as well record it to some extent. Other way. So yeah, if you enjoy swords, if you want to talk about swords, if you have swords, if you don't have swords, I'd like to talk about them. So please, comment or join Discord or do any of those things, and we'll talk more about swords. Yeah, that was the video. Bye.